Compact crossovers are a big business right now. It seems every day more and more of these high-riding hatchbacks are finding their way into consumers' homes.
With a go-anywhere attitude, it's easy to understand why these are quickly becoming America's one-size-fits-all solution.
With the segment so big, manufacturers are constantly trying to update their vehicles to stay on top.
And this year is no different, which is why we've decided to sort through the mess, assembling key players from the segment with a focus on fuel economy, practicality, price, and style.
Unfortunately, one key competitor, the Ford Escape, could not make it, but we have assembled 8 other competitors, and now it's time to find out which one is right for you. Finishing in 8th place at an as-tested price of $31,770, obtaining observed fuel economy numbers of 24 miles per gallon, is the Jeep Compass. Now, as the oldest and smallest crossover in this comparison, the Compass kind of had its work cut out for it right from the start. But it does have a new 6-speed automatic transmission and the baby Grand Cherokee looks, so maybe it would surprise us. But sadly, it didn't. Even though the new 6-speed does improve the driving experience, there's still this mechanical hiss from the passenger footwell that was found with the old CVT. The vehicle ranked worst for NVH and tied the RAV4 for the worst ride. Inside, there are some good and bad points. For instance, it's full of hard, cheap plastic, and the gauges look decades old. However, these seats look great in brown leather and are very comfortable. Many of us like the Equinox system and this thick rim multi-function steering wheel. However, this wasn't enough to save the Compass. It got the worst observed fuel economy out of any of the non-turbo 4-cylinder models, and despite being mid-priced in the comparison, it's lacking options like a telescopic steering wheel, full power seat, or backup camera. Safe to say, the Compass is no longer competitive with more modern, larger compact crossovers. However, Jeep has an all-new Cherokee on the horizon. Do I smell a rematch?
Coming in 7th place, we've got the Chevrolet Equinox. Now, it costs about $27,630 as tested, and on average, it returned 26.1 miles per gallon. The Equinox loses points for its stodgy 4-cylinder engine, its subpar handling characteristics, and its poor stereo, among other things. You know, it doesn't have the least cargo space of all of the vehicles we have today, but it's really right at the low end nonetheless, and again, that hurt it in this category. Now, it's worth noting that the Equinox is getting a little bit old compared to every other car we have out here, and you know, that probably accounts for part of the reason why it falls so low in the rankings. It's not to say that everything's bad about it though. In fact, even though this car has cloth seats, I gotta say, I find that the buckets are probably some of the most comfortable of all the cars we have out. Not only that, but the touchscreen is simple, easy to use, and it's a much friendlier interface than you get on some of the other products. Also, Chevrolet cleverly puts this little hood over top that allows you to see it even in the brightest of lights, which has been a problem with some of the other cars.
Coming in 6th place at an as-tested price of $34,725 and achieving 22.4 miles per gallon is the Mitsubishi Outlander. One look at the Outlander and it's easy to write it off. The exterior doesn't look that good, and in fact, we were using words like hideous, offensive, and bizarre when describing its general shape. There's no way a vehicle with sheet metal as ugly as this could be any good, right? Wrong. The Mitsubishi Outlander is the only vehicle in this comparison with a V6 option and a 3rd row of seating. It has one of the smoothest rides and battled the Forester for top scores in NVH and ride comfort. Power is smooth and the Outlander just eats up miles effortlessly thanks to the V6 engine. Speaking of which, the engine is powerful but not nearly as powerful as you expect from a V6. The interior was ranked as one of the most stylish in the segment, which is really strange considering the outside was ranked the least stylish. For as good as the Outlander is as a family hauler, there's also a fun side to this crossover. First, we have paddle shifters that look like they're stolen straight from the Evo, and then there's the stereo. The Rockford Fosgate stereo puts out over 700 watts of power, has speakers everywhere, and a massive sub in the trunk. If we were to buy a vehicle at any price range based on stereo alone, this would be it. This is the most ridiculously awesome system ever put in a regular car. The Outlander really is a good crossover. When we added up all of our subjective rankings, it was actually in 3rd place. So what's it doing in 6th? Well, a couple reasons. First, there's the exterior, which I've beaten to death. And then there's price. This is the most expensive vehicle in the segment, and it gets the worst gas mileage. Add in a cargo opening that is way too narrow for large objects, and the most asinine second row folding seat mechanism, and this vehicle ends up falling down to 6th place.
Coming in 5th place, we've got the Honda CR-V. It costs just over $31,000 as equipped and returned just under 26 miles per gallon. If you're surprised to see such a stupendous product all the way down in 5th place, you're probably not alone. And to be honest, it could have gotten to the top 3 had it not lost so many points for styling. Aside from styling, the other things that we found to be problematic with this car are the noise and vibration. This car is second only in how noisy it is to the Jeep Compass, which, to give you some perspective, came in last place overall and was especially harsh to drive. Now, if you can get past all that, there's actually a fantastic crossover to drive here. You get a peppy 4-cylinder engine, the steering feel is happy in the corners and very responsive, and you get a user-friendly cabin. For example, the center console I'm in love with. It rolls back and gives you plenty of storage space. Not only that, but it returned middle-of-the-pack fuel economy, and how appropriate is that for a car in 5th place?
Arriving in 4th place at an as-tested price of $31,430, achieving 25.9 miles per gallon, is the Toyota RAV4. All new this year, Toyota has significantly changed the mission statement of the RAV4. Gone are the V6 and 3rd row options. More style was on the menu for the redesign of the RAV4, and both the outside and inside have received a serious shot in the looks department. The interior was voted the 2nd most stylish after the Outlander, but all this style does lead to some strange ergonomics. There's a shelf across the dash that hides some buttons underneath, and it's hard to both see and reach them. As well, a usual Toyota pillar fit and finish is a little lacking here. There's some cheap materials, and some of the panels don't match up 100%. And then there's this cheap fake carbon fiber. I don't know what they're thinking by putting this in. One hallmark of all Toyota RAV4s is how easy they are to drive, and this new model is no different. The steering, handling, and throttle response are all predictable, and anyone can get behind the wheel and drive this without any issue. Now, it isn't exactly sporty, but everything's set up to save fuel. Unfortunately, the RAV4 only finished mid-pack when it came to observed fuel economy. But the biggest issue with the RAV4 is its ride. The suspension is set up way too stiff. This is a crossover, not a sports car, and we can't understand why Toyota has tuned the suspension so stiff. It crashes over even the most minor of imperfection on the road. If they were to just loosen up the suspension a little bit more, the RAV4 would be so much better. Although the RAV4 is rated to have the most cargo capacity, we found when test fitting large objects that it wasn't quite as deep or wide as the Santa Fe Sport. Now, it does have a really low loading floor and seems to have more height than any of the other crossovers in the cargo area. In the end, when all the scores were totaled up, the RAV4 finished mid-pack in most categories, so it should be no surprise that it finished mid-pack in the comparison. That said, it did finish only 1.5 points out of 3rd place, and if, say, the suspension was set up a little better, it probably could have come 3rd. And that brings us to the final 3. One of these vehicles barely beat the Honda CR-V and the Toyota RAV4 for a spot on the podium.
Meanwhile, the other 2 cleaned up with much higher scores than the rest. So let's take them for a spin and find out which one really is the best. Equipped with the optional 2-liter turbocharged engine, our Hyundai Santa Fe Sport cost about $30,500. That turbo engine also meant that it got the 2nd worst fuel economy of all of the vehicles, with an average of 23.3 miles per gallon. Now, as you can probably see, this car is also equipped with cloth seats, and none of that, surprisingly, was enough to keep it out of the top 3. I know what you're thinking. A car with cloth seats in the top 3? How can it be? Well, in typical Hyundai fashion, this car is all about getting more for your money. The base engine only makes 190 horsepower, but this one makes 264, and step on the gas, it goes. It's more powerful than any other car we've got out here. Now, you give some stuff up to stay within the price bracket though. For example, I don't have a touchscreen. I don't have a backup camera. In fact, I don't have very much of anything compared to these other cars. It really boils down to the Santa Fe illustrating an important point within the segment. It's totally up to you to choose what you want. You can take a car like this that has a more powerful engine but gives up content, or on the other hand, you could take something that has fancier tech features, all within relatively similar pricing structures. Now, not only that, but it's worth noting that this car is probably one of the most attractive that we've brought out.
Claiming a podium spot at a price of $33,220 and achieving 28 miles per gallon is the Subaru Forester. All new this year, the 2014 Forester looks like Foresters of old and retains the familiar boxy shape that swaggers into a room and screams, "I'm a Subaru." Because it's a box in the back, the 3/4 windows are actually usable and the hatch is flush, items missing from basically every other crossover in this comparison. The 2.5-liter engine in this vehicle feels far more powerful than it really is, thanks in part to the CVT. In fact, that CVT is one of the reasons the Forester's in the top 3. Unlike some other CVTs, this transmission doesn't try to mimic gears, but will constantly adjust RPM ranges to avoid the dreaded drone that plagued early CVTs. The Forester ranked first place in the comparison in driver position, ride comfort, and MVH, and finished second in handling and stereo. Yes, after years and years of putting in some of the crappiest stereos, someone at Subaru finally listened and threw a Harman Kardon kicking sound system into this vehicle. But the real ace up the Forester's sleeve is value. True, it may be the second most expensive vehicle here, but it matches the more expensive Outlander option for option, and some of the features like the eyesight system work much better than they do in the Outlander. Add to that the Forester achieved the best observed fuel economy of the entire comparison, and it appears Subaru has done a great job with this new Forester.
And then there's the CX-5. Come on, are you really surprised? You knew it was going to make the top 3. Now let's get into the details. Our car cost just under $32,000 and it returned about 26.4 miles per gallon on average. If you want a car that's fun to drive, handles well, and returns very good fuel economy, it's hard to beat what Mazda's doing these days. It's not as powerful as something as, say, the Santa Fe Sport that I was talking about a second ago, but it's a much more rounded package. You have navigation, a backup camera, you have rear cross traffic alert, all sorts of content that you'd miss in something else. And on top of that, it's worth pointing out that this is our long-term tester, so we've really spent a lot of time getting to know the car. Mind you, there are some flaws that are worth pointing out. For example, we've noticed that the transmission likes to stay in very low RPMs to protect that fuel economy figure, and it leads to the engine staying in a really booming low range that's frustrating, and it just creates this noise in the cabin that we'd really prefer Mazda to avoid. In my opinion, that is a very small price to pay for what's otherwise a fantastic overall package.
And now on to the results. Coming in third place is the powerful, spacious Hyundai Santa Fe Sport.
And that brings it down to the final 2, and the winner is the Subaru Forester. Try as Mazda may, it just couldn't stack up, but it's worth pointing out that this was an incredibly close comparison. The Forester is easy to drive, it got the best fuel economy, and to top it all off, it's also one of the safest crossovers in the segment. All of that adds up to give it the win.
For more on this car comparison and others like it, visit AutoGuide.com.